Hello and welcome. I'm Becky with Malvern Books. Tonight we're very pleased to host Andrés de la Casa Huerta with his book, Reading Quirks. Andrés, along with longtime friend Javier Garcia de Moral, wanted to open a place that combined two of their great loves, books and booze. In 2014, their dreams were realized and they opened the Wild Detectives in Dallas. The store has been recognized as the best bookstore in Dallas multiple times since its opening, and they host not only a wonderfully curated collection, but in non-COVID times, many outstanding events. And now the two Spanish expats, along with illustrator Laura Pacheco, have provided us with something else to enjoy with this book about readers. Andrés?
Oh, you have to unmute yourself, Andrés.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Becky, for the introduction. Yeah, I mean, we published this book at the end of last year, and the thing is, we were planning to do a tour on 2020, but I think, like everybody else, 2020 is not working along with us, right? So yeah, without further ado, I'm just gonna start sharing my screen and go over the presentation. Tell me, you guys, please tell me if.
Yes, if you'll look down at the bottom, there, yeah. You see it? Okay, we've got it. I see it.
You got it, right? Okay, so let's start. So Reading Quirks is a book about reading and the love for books, and it's written by a bookstore, and I cannot stress that enough. If you want it in an elevator pitch kind of format, I could say that Reading Quirks is a witty and lighthearted ode to the immense pleasure of reading and its resulting byproduct, neurosis. So as I said, the book was written by a bookstore, and the bookstore who wrote it is this one, is The Wild Detectives. The Wild Detectives is a small operation in Oak Cliff, in the south of Dallas. And we like to consider ourselves a cultural hub in the neighborhood. We host events, we bring authors, we do international literary festival in September called High Festival, in which we bring a lot of authors from Latin America. Javi and I both are Spanish, so we try to bring as much literature in Spanish as we can. And the bookstore was opened in 2014, and we've been very welcome in Dallas, as I was just talking to you guys a couple of minutes ago. So yes, the bookstore was written by a bookstore, but who were the humans that wrote the book? So these are, myself and Javier. Javier is the owner of the bookstore. I joined the team in December 2014 to run the communication and to strategize the brand. And yeah, I mean, we kind of I proposed the idea to Javi to do this series of cartoons, and we've been doing it since 2016. So the illustrator is Laura Pacheco. Laura Pacheco, I mean, we had people in common, so she was our choice for that idea that we came up with. We actually collaborated with her before. At some point, we wanted to create a new menu for the store, and I wanted to have illustrations of the place. So the illustrations are set in the Wild Detectives, and what we wanted to do is to have an author with a quote that was related to the page in which people were. So Laura did these illustrations. We were super, super happy with her style. And when we started to think about the idea of the book, she was the clear option for us. Even, I remember the first scripts that I wrote, I had her style already in mind for the kind of thing we wanted to do. So Laura would love to be here. She's in Spain, meaning that she's sleeping at this point. So she sent us a video in which she's gonna introduce herself. The video is in Spanish, like she's talking in the video. It's in Spanish, but I subtitle it. So hopefully you guys will be able to follow along.
Hola, soy Laura Pacheco y soy la ilustradora de Bibliomanías. Me gusta mucho grabarme mientras dibujo porque luego veo el vídeo y me relaja mucho ver cómo mi trabajo se hace solo. Y así además podéis ver el proceso de una ilustración. Bibliomanías comenzó en 2016. Andrés me propuso ilustrar una serie de tiras cómicas para las redes sociales de The Wild Detectives. Yo ya había trabajado anteriormente con ellos ilustrando el menú de la librería Bar y me lo había pasado muy bien haciéndolo, así que dije que sí. Estuvimos haciendo una tira semanal durante 2 años. En ese tiempo estuvimos, sin conocernos en persona, cruzándonos cientos de mails. Desde el primer momento nos entendimos muy bien. Hasta ese momento yo solo había trabajado o guionizando mis propias tiras o ilustrando guiones de mi hermana, que es como si compartiera cerebro con ella. Por eso al principio se me hizo más complicado trabajar con otro guionista, pero con el tiempo ha resultado ser muy enriquecedor. Mis tiras favoritas son las más emocionales, como la de la chica que lee un libro que pertenecía a su madre y se emociona al leer las notas que ésta había escrito de joven. Desde el principio nos planteamos recopilar todas las tiras en un libro, así que terminamos la serie cuando ya teníamos suficiente material. Publicar el libro fue como el perfecto broche final de la colaboración, porque fuimos a Logroño a presentarlo. En las tiras la mayoría de los personajes son ficticios, pero también aparecen algunas personas de verdad que son amigos de Andrés y de los dueños de The Wild Detectives. Yo no los conocía en persona y tuve que dibujarlos a partir de fotos. Así que en Logroño, además de conocer por fin a Andrés en persona, conocí también a los padres y familiares de algunas personas que había dibujado. Y fue una situación muy extraña, pero muy emocionante también.
So that was Laura. As you can see, she's very talented. And one thing we loved about Laura from the beginning was like how much expression and personality she could bring to the characters with a minimum amount of strokes. And you know, I'll be presenting some of the cartoons we did. You guys will be able to see that. So the book was written weekly, or you know, when we were posting the cartoons on social media, they were written weekly here in Dallas. And I was just sending emails to Laura that was living in Almeria. And the whole collaboration lasted for a year and a half. And it was just like emails coming and going in Almeria, Dallas all the time. The other city I would like to highlight here is Logroño, which is my hometown. And the reason why it's here is because we, when we published the book, we published the book first in Spain, and we published it with a local publisher in Spain who are friends of us. They're called Pepitas. And when we published the book here in the States, we also brought Pepitas as part of the collaboration to publish the book here in the States. So the timeline of the project is something like this. Like, you know, the idea came up in a gym in the spring of 2016. We started publishing the cartoons on our social media in September 2016. We knew from the beginning that we wanted to do 72, even though I didn't know what I was going to put myself into. And I'll talk about that later. And then we finished that first part of the project in January 2018. That year, we already decided we were going to publish the book. We got some you know, encouragement, I guess, from people saying that they thought the book could be, like, the cartoons could be published. So I wasn't happy with all the cartoons we had posted that so far. So we took out of the compilation some of the cartoons we posted, and we worked in 14 new cartoons. And those cartoons were a little bit different. It was, you know, we had more time to work on them. We were not, you know, with the prison of having to, or the pressure of having to publish one per week. So the first time we published was in Spain. So we published the book, and it's called Bibliomanías. Right? That's how we call the book in Spain. And it was published on my birthday on January 18, 2019. And then we published it here in the States in December 17. So as I was also mentioning before, we missed Christmas both times. So we were trying to publish Bibliomanias before Christmas. In 2018, we couldn't, and we thought we learned the lesson, but actually we didn't. Again, we missed Christmas. I mean, we published just 1 week before, but meaning like, all the sales from Christmas were not part of our sales. So as you can see here, I mean, I find this very, very funny. The reason why I have this GIF here is because, as you can see, for some reason, threadmills seem to inspire a lot of interesting ideas. And actually, reading Quirks was thought out the first time as I was actually doing a workout, doing my workouts in the gym. So it happened as I was listening to this podcast called Reading Lives. It's a podcast that Book Riot used to have. They don't do it anymore. And what I did like about this podcast is the interviewer was talking to people who had something to do with books. And sometimes they were authors, but they were also librarians, booksellers, editors, publishers. And the conversation was always around their reads, how they are as readers, what their behavior around books were. And I found it very interesting to see first how different those behaviors were from each other, but at the same time, how many identifiable traits they had that I could see in myself as well as a reader. So as I was running, I guess I decided to come together that idea of what if we work on a series of social posts that actually taps into that, like, into people's reading quirks, right? So the reason why we wanted to do that, and here I'm showing 3 posts to show how we were posting them. The reason to do that is because we wanted to get readers something to identify with, right? Because in a way, it's very easy to find the team movies and team music shows and team music in general, but it's a little bit more difficult to talk about team readers. And I think it's because the act of reading itself, it's a very solitary thing. So as much as we all like to talk about books, there is not this kind of like shared experience about readers. So we wanted to tap into that to give readers a sense of belonging to some sort of a tribe or a group, right? So now I'm going to talk about, I'm going to use one of these cartoons as an example to talk about the process that was behind our comic strips. And in this case, I remember being in the store in our shop at the Wild Detectives, and there was a podcast being recorded in which a journalist that I don't remember her name now was interviewing Sarah Epola, which is a local author here in Dallas. She published this book called Blackout. It's a memoir about her drinking years and actually her recovery, which actually, in my case, I found that second half of the book much more interesting. So I saw this book, which was the book that the interviewer had read and had, a lot of post-its and marks to, I guess, articulate her interview with Sarah. And I fell in love with a book like this. I just loved the way it was just in tatters. It felt overused, abused, devoured. So it was something very alive about this book. So from here, I felt like I would like to tell the story of how a reader gets to this point, right? So the way we started all our cartoons is with this structure. So they were going to be 4 frames and a punchline. So when I sat down, or when I was sitting down to actually think on these comics, I always had to face the same situation, which is like, okay, what are the 4 images that are gonna tell this story? And then I had to come up with a punchline, which actually was much more difficult than coming up with the story, at least for me. I'm not a writer, so my trade is in graphic design, so everything visual, I feel a little bit more skilled on that. So I just put these things together. Then I wrote an email to Laura, and it was always the same structure, like F1, so frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, and I was in each frame I was giving some instructions about what the scene was, and then if it was any dialogue, it was always going to be under all these epigraphs, and then the punchline. So she receives the email, she worked on the drawings, and that's the kind of material I was receiving. And it was always very exciting to me to open an email from Laura, because I have pictured the images in my mind with her style. And then I was receiving most of the times a very, very similar idea to what I had in mind. So that was always very satisfying to me to actually get her emails with these. So in this case, I mean, she did a whole story. I knew I wanted to make the book more of a protagonist of the story. So I asked her to work a little bit more. I gave her some comments on how to work on the last frame. And she gave me different options. I wanted the book to be front and center and bigger. This one I actually really, really like. I really like the kind of like dead emoji that comes out from the book. And I did like it, but at the same time, I wanted kind of like just to focus on the book. And at some point, I was not very happy with the punchline. And as I mentioned before, like the punchline was very difficult for me. In a way, this felt like cheating because it was not really saying anything, just kind of like a hashtag, which, kind of cute and trendy, but probably not saying much. And then that line at the end, I actually really, really liked it. So I thought, okay, why don't we keep the book on its own? We make it feel like it's just, done with life in a way, and have this line as a punchline. So as we were moving forward, then she started to, ink it properly and give it color. And one thing that was very satisfying to me also was that every time we're showing a book close enough, I would like that book to be a real book. And I always try to recommend some books that we really liked in the bookstore. In this case is The Marriage Plot by Jeffrey Eugenides, which is a read that I will recommend to anyone. And I mean, in terms of how the book looked like now with the spiral, so it felt like, like a tired book, I was very, very happy with it. But as I mentioned before, they're not the same cartoons, or some of the cartoons are not the same if you compare the ones that we publish on our social media to the ones that you will find on the book. So in this case, Javi came up with a new punchline during that year, until 2018, when we were preparing the book. And this punchline, I personally think is brilliant. It's just showing how, as same way that you submerge yourself into the story of the book is with you. It's gonna live with you every moment as you read it. So, that book being tired is probably being tired of following you along as you read it. So when I started to think about the book, I didn't think too much about continuity, because all of them felt like, like isolated stories. But as we were moving forward, I realized that, it wasn't that much realizing, such as getting close to some of the characters you've written about, right? So I knew, for example, this guy, which Laura and myself used to call him El Novio Agonías, which is kind of like the agonic boyfriend. He's kind of like a very neurotic guy. So the comic strip on the left, I think it was kind of like number 3, number 4, right? And he's just seeing how his girlfriend is ear-dogging the book way deeper, like getting even within the text on the page. And for him, that was kind of like some sort of a sacrilege. So from there, there were other stories that, and maybe because myself, I am also a little bit neurotic, I saw some of the stories being about a character that was quite neurotic. So we started to use him. And same happened with other characters as well. Like as we were moving forward, we were kind of like reusing some of the characters we've used in the past. And all of them were kind of like getting more defined in terms of what were the personality they were having. So this is another character we've been working with in the book. In this case, this cartoon is for kind of like more towards the end of the book. So, we were feeling way more comfortable about, or I was at least feeling much more comfortable with my writing than at the beginning. And I mean, Laura didn't need to feel more comfortable. She was just brilliant from the get-go. So in this case, this is a story that I really like. And it actually comes from an interview that I read about a musician that I like in Spain. And she was big in the 80s. She's now, I don't know, probably in her 50s, 60s. And she's saying like, having been a youngster that used to go out a lot, since she was kind of like, in her 40s, 50s, she doesn't care anymore. Like she much prefers to stay at home in the company of a good book, right? So in this case, her friend is calling her and asking her to get out for New Year's Eve and just, come along, because there are a lot of cute guys that have great conversation. And what she says is like, I don't need better. There is no better conversation than the one that I'm having now with my book, right? So I want to show this cartoon because for this project, representation was something that we were very keen to work with. I actually challenged myself to every story that I came up with, try to change the gender, try to change the ethnicities, and just to see how they felt, because obviously I've been educated in a very heteronormative society as anybody else, and my first ideas were actually using roles that I didn't decide they were going to be those. So I kind of like wanted to see how the stories would feel changing those kind of roles, right, and pushing them a little bit more. And in this case, what I really like about this particular one, and again, like the idea came from another conversation with a friend who told me like, oh no, it's great what you're doing, but what about showing also disabled people? And I said, well, that's amazing, let's do that. So there are other cartoons that you can see on our social posts that have her as a protagonist. But in this one, what I really like is like, she's not a nice person here. Like she's just being like very difficult to her boyfriend. And in a way, I thought it was good to do that. It was kind of like, not like, let's stop being condescending about the way we portray these people. They're, 3D, three-dimensional people as well. And I was very happy with the way this particular cartoon came out. So I've been talking about fictional characters. Now, at some point in the story, what happened was that, we were planning to do 72 stories about reading Quirks. And I discovered very quickly that that was not going to be possible, because there is a limited amount of Quirks that you can find or think of. And I needed to find new ways to bring life to the stories. So, I started to reach out to friends and to talk to them and ask them about their own Quirks. And at some point I decided to actually include them in the book. From the beginning, the book was kind of like a friend situation, like, Javi, Paco and I have been doing the Wild Readings for some time. We're very close friends all together. Laura, was actually coming to the project through friends. So at some point we actually, brought the friends inside of the book as well. So in this case, the guy is this guy, Andrés. It's one of our friends back home. Javi and I, we share the same friends back home. He's one of them, and his girlfriend, Carmen. And I wanted to show them because they are fundamental to this story, because Laura is actually Carmen's sister. And Carmen was the one who helped us to translate the comics from English into Spanish when we published the book in Spain. And one thing that I really love about Lara is like how she was able to make them very alike, but at the same time still very cartoony. And when I saw my friend Andrés for the first time in the cartoon, I was like blown away. I was just like, it's my friend. I mean, even the way he moves is very much like him. This is actually the first cartoon that we published. I wanted to tell this story, maybe because I don't think Javi and I have resolved this situation yet. I'm blaming him for having borrowed a book from me at some point and never give it back. To this day, I'm still asking him for the book, and he says like he doesn't have it. So I expect one day to actually find it in his bookshelves and then get very, very annoyed with him. So the story here is like, there is this conversation going on, and they mentioned this book, which is actually the book that I'm missing, The Book of Illusions by Paul Auster, also very, very great read. And the guy says like he hasn't read it. And the other guy gets very annoyed. He goes to the shelf because he knows he's there, and he finds the book. He's like, "You've been lying to my face for 15 years, right?" This is another story that was based on personal, my own personal story, which is one of the things that I used towards the second half of the book when I needed to kind of like bring more stories to the page. So in this case, there is this young girl who comes home and says, straight away, "Mom, I love you." And she's kind of like the mom is happy and surprised and like, "Well, what happened?" And what happened is like the girl has read a book from her mom, and in the book she could find the notes that her mom wrote when she read it. So there is this kind of like bridge over time in which these two women connect to each other. And that's based on something that happened to me. Like my mom is a German teacher, but she taught literature for some time. And when I was in my last year of high school, I had to read, literature was kind of like one of my big subjects, and I had to read a lot of books. And some of the books in my syllabus were books that my mom had taught back in the day, probably, I don't know, maybe 20 years earlier than that. So I remember reading, in particular, one of those books that had a lot of comments from my mom to prepare her own class. And it was great. It was just kind of like, like very special to me to see, the stream of thought of my mom and, what kind of things she were finding interesting about the book and, what were her comments about it. This one is also another cartoon that I want to stop a little bit about, and it's connected to the bookstore. So in this case, we're showing Roberto Bolaño and Santiago Papasquiaro, which are, Roberto Bolaño is the author of of the Savage Detectives, which is the name that inspired the name of the shop. And there is this picture that I love. Like I found it in a documentary in the Spanish, in the national Spanish TV. And it's Roberto Bolaño and Santiago Papasquiaro as young people, very much the time in which the story of the Savage Detectives happened, right? So the first half, or the kind of like the first episode chapter of the book, it's about this community of writers, and actually, same as with On the Road with Jack Kerouac, you have Roberto Bolaño transmuting into Arturo Velano, and Santiago Papasquiaro is Ulises Lima, which are kind of like one of the two main characters in the book. So I actually wanted to show them like that. I wanted to show them in that time. And the story actually came from that documentary that I mentioned. In the documentary, Roberto Bolaño is talking to a journalist, and he's saying how he couldn't understand to this day how Santiago was always giving his books back to him wet, right? So there's this situation in which, I guess like Roberto Bolaño lent a book to Santiago, and Santiago read it, and then, meeting the next time and giving the book back, and the book is all damp. And what Roberto Bolaño tells in the interview is like the reason why that happened is because Santiago used to read in the shower. He used to kind of like get inside of the shower with a cigarette and just, kind of like extend his arm, and while he was getting in the shower, just read. And to me, it was a great way to tell this thing about like, reading has to compete with so many things, and you have to try to make some room for it. Like, there is, it's strange. Like, I think it's very strange when people have, like, the day offers them time to read. The time to read is always something you fight to have, in a way. And this one, which kind of like reminds me a little bit to the other one, but the story is a little bit different. So we wanted to do a cameo on the book. So this is Javi, myself, and Paco. Paco, I haven't talked too much about him, but Paco is the other co-owner of the shop. Javi and himself put the store together, and then Paco had to move from Dallas for work, and he's now living in Madrid, but he's still a partner, and he's still co-owner of the bookstore. So what happens when we get together is like we are very, we start talking about books and movies, and we're very passionate about it. And usually probably, a few drinks will happen around that. And there is this particular book. Oh, sorry. I thought I had it here. I don't have it here. There is this particular book called After the Winter by Guadalupe Nettel, which personally I think is a brilliant book. But there is this argument that has been on for years, in which Javi and I, we actually defend the book, and Paco really much hates it. So we always get into this, senseless kind of discussion, arguments around the book. And I just wanted to tell that story. And in a way, it was a way to kind of like include Paco. I think he will have liked to be more present in the story of the bookstore. And I thought this was kind of be like a great homage to those moments we spent together that actually were also like the Wild Detectives in a way is a result of these kind of things, like getting together, starting to talk crazy and coming up with plans like let's open a bookstore. Another cheat that I used to do when I couldn't come up with an idea in a week was trying to use quotes. This one in particular, I really like it. There is, to me at least, there is this very soothing feeling of just hide behind a book. The world just stops. You don't have to deal with with mundane shit, right? And it feels great. So I just wanted to show. I wanted to show that here. Another thing that it's very much something that I keep in my own life, which is this. I mean, there's other people calling it that way as well, but it's this thing called like the cosmic perspective, and for me, something that I keep very present to myself on a daily basis. So the two ideas on the one on the left, basically what happens is that there are these two women in camping, and one of them start talking about how weird it is to read. And what she's trying to convey is the fact that, in a universe that it's all about chaos and nothingness, like we humans have developed a way in which we can actually record thoughts and keep them and actually evolve as a species because we stand on the shoulders of the people who came before us. And that's kind of like an idea I found in a book, in this particular book, The Art of Reading by Damon Young. And he had this line that said, like, cosmically speaking, reading is against all odds. And I found it, I don't know, I really, really like that line. And I wanted to do a story around that. The other one comes from a conversation that I had with Louisa Hall, who I don't think she lives in Austin anymore, but she used to live in Austin. She's an amazing author. There is a book that we in the store read called Speak, that it's among my favorite books. And we interviewed her, and she had this thing in which she said that books were some sort of an AI device that were like technology, like cutting edge technology in a way. So the way we told that story, there is this character called Charles. He's a librarian. He's been in other stories in the book as well. And he's a very sweet, tender, and very cultivated man, right? So he's talking to his niece and he's trying to get her to read. And he's actually selling a book like, do you want a fascinating gadget, cutting edge technology? There is nothing like this anywhere. And she's a little bit disappointed when she sees the book. But what he's trying to tell her, and he uses a Milton reference to do that, is that, as Milton said, a good book is the lifeblood of a master spirit, and balm and treasure up on purpose to a life beyond life. And same idea here, like books in a way are these time capsules in which you can have a conversation with somebody that probably is not going to be around. And also, they're usually people who have put a lot of thought into what they've done. So, you're talking with somebody who really measure all the words that they put in those books. And in this case, here, there is this other book that I'm going to show here is The Rights of the Reader by Daniel Pennack, which again, very recommendable. He has kind of like a bill of rights for readers, and it's very interesting to see what are our rights as readers. And it includes like, actually don't want to read a book or don't go farther with a book if you're not finding it interesting in the first 50 pages. So there were some of the ideas in that book that I tried to bring to our comics as well. And In the first one, we have again the neurotic boyfriend, and he's very distressed because there are these 2 books he wants to read, but he's already projecting the amount of time he has to live, and the number of books he's going to read are limited, meaning that the choice of what to read is actually a very metaphysical one, right? So what his girlfriend, which is much more practical than him, tells him is that if you stop giving so much thought to what to read and just sit your ass and start reading, then you will actually probably put some more books into that list that you're projecting. And the other one, it's a very sweet story. It was told to me by a friend as well, and she told me like it would be amazing to give somebody that you care about time for reading as a present. And in this case, the book that I just showed, The Rights of the Reader, he's talking about how reading is a continuous fight against the tyranny of living. Like, anything in your life is going to get always in between you and your books. So what this guy is doing, he's giving his boyfriend 20 hours of reading. He's going to take care of everything else. So, his boyfriend can actually just relax and read. And the last cartoon that I'm going to talk about is this one. I don't think I've mentioned it, but the 3 of us, Paco, Javi, and I, we lived in Dublin for some time. We actually, there were different times, but it was almost a year that we lived together in Dublin. And that was actually the first city we all lived after living in Spain, our first expat experience. And we all have like dear memories of that time. So in this case, I wanted to show a story about poetry. And the place that I said it was in this bar. It's called the Library Bar in Dublin, in center of town. And that was a place that I used to go with my friends after work at least once a week. And it's a beautiful place. It has a chimney, just surrounded by books. It has all this kind of like, Victorian-like style. And, getting there, having a Guinness and talking about books was something that we actually really enjoyed. So I'm showing my friends here, Oscar and Patricia. And as I mentioned, this was one of the cartoons that we did on the second part of the project after we had finished with the social media campaign. So this was something that I had a little bit more time. And I realized that I hadn't said anything about poetry yet. And I wanted to have at least one cartoon that could talk about poetry. So the story goes like this. One of my friends, Oscar, says that he's amazed by the sunset in Dublin, which is true. Sunsets in Dublin, I think it's because of the latitude. It's just, they're amazing. And he's just, very pleased with the sunset. And then Patricia is looking at her tea and she's saying like, have you noticed that things floating tend to get together? And once together, they float in the same direction. To which Oscar answers, trying to be funny, I guess, like, they're probably comforting each other before they imminent drowning. And Patricia keeps it cool and said, or maybe it's summer and they just met each other at a beach party. And here probably is the punchline that I'm the proudest of, or of all the ones that I did. And this one says like, there are beautiful things and beauty in things. For the former, just look around. For the latter, read poetry. And with that, I'm just gonna end my presentation. I can hear you, Becky.
That was great. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you so much.
It was, and I can only imagine the pressure it would be to come up with that kind of wit and also the beautiful, the cool drawings that go together with it on that kind of pace when you were putting them out in your social media campaign.
Yeah, we were trying. So, some of them came quickly and some others were more difficult. And, you could have the story, but maybe, you had a good idea, but maybe you didn't know how to tell the story, or you had the story, but you didn't have the punchline. And the way we tend to work was like, if I had some time and I was trying to write 4 or 5 and then send 4 or 5 altogether to Laura, so we could have some time, some buffer, right? To be able to miss one. It's like, okay, I'm not going to write this week because I have too much work. Mm-hmm. And it worked out. I mean, there were some times where I thought we were not gonna make it, but you know, we made it. We made it.
Yeah, that's great. And then to have it all come together in a book, that's really, I mean, that's wonderful. That's pretty brilliant idea, actually. And
Thank you so much, Becky. I appreciate
so many of the quirks that you mentioned, you know, I can see myself, except for that dog earing, you know, because only monsters dog ear books.
Well, but here's the question. I mean, I do dog ear, but I just do it very gently, and just is like, you know, kind of like half
Yeah.
a centimeter, like
Yeah,
very,
I
very
like,
tiny
I
mark.
like, I like the rules where this, you cannot go beyond this
Can't
area.
go beyond the very corner.
You can't go, you can't go into the text. Because I know people who just take the page and fold it in half.
I've seen that. That to me is like, why are you doing that? I mean,
What
the book
about
is your friend.
what about people? And I think of the book that's really been well read. You know, they'll mark the book with anything, and so if they're sitting there in a McDonald's and they've got to get up and go get another drink or something like that, they'll mark it with a French fry.
Oh no!
And so the
That is
grease
like,
just
you
slips
know,
through
the
it.
grease spreads on the
Yeah.
page.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, they're amazing. They're amazing things that happen with books, and
I mean, with one of the stories we have is, I mean, it doesn't tell the story of how you mark books, but it tells the story of, because I heard like some people who actually use very mundane things to mark their books, meaning like, you know, the bus ticket or film ticket, or, you know, like the paper they were given in the laundry. And it's all very, I mean, it's meaningless, but when you find that 3 years later, 5 years later, that tells you a story. And I thought that was beautiful as well, like how books can tell you the story of the moment that you were reading them, right?
That's true.
yeah, I find theater tickets and you know,
There you go.
airline tickets. You know, of course, that means I never finished the book, but
But still, I mean, one day, you know, you take the book out of the shelf and the thing falls, and it's like, oh, that day.
That's right. That's true. I mean, I use anything handy, and receipts. I have a lot of receipts in books. Just
I use my remote. I use my television or radio remote control too often. You know,
really just to put it, just to mark the play.
Like in between the pages, right?
It's better than taking it and turning it on its face and splitting the spine.
I mean, I do that very rarely, but sometimes I do. If I'm in a rush, I'm like, oh, there's nothing.
No, you know what's funny? Like I think in less than 3 minutes, you've talked about probably 5 or 6 cartoons that are in the book. The spine bending, those things are in the book.
Yeah, I saw that this afternoon.
It means that, you know, we actually got some of these quirks right.
It's a very good, entertaining book. Congratulations!
I appreciate
really
it.
enjoyed it this afternoon, and I read it.
Really enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, it's like enjoyed seeing about it. I'm looking forward to looking at it more in the store and getting to look through it more. So
thank you for this. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. The way you did it, the effort that you made to put this together.
Thank you so much. Oh, I mean, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, and we can't wait to have you here in Malvern Books again. And I'll let Becky do the outro.
I mean, be assured that I will be there eventually. Like every time I go to Austin, I usually pass by Malvern and get a couple of books.
Well, we're always happy to see you, and anyone watching this, feel free to come by and see us at Malvern Books and give us a call, 512-322-2097. We're always happy to talk to you. Thanks very much.